watching African Experts with Vickie Remoe.
Ao Digo, Akwaba, and welcome to African Experts with Vickie Remoe, the show that brings you African entrepreneurs, practitioners, researchers, and innovators with big ideas, solutions, insights on issues shaping African lives across the continent. If you're just joining us for the first time, Kushe. I'm a journalist from Sierra Leone who grew up in the US. Over the past 15 years, I've been documenting African culture, business, and current affairs in print, TV, and online. We meet here on Sundays to ask big questions and to learn from African experts and viewers like you. If you're not yet subscribed to our YouTube channel, make sure you do so that you never miss another episode. Also, this is a live show. Feel free to ask questions, share your thoughts, engage with each other in the comment section. And without a question, you definitely want to share this broadcast on your feed. We are going to answer your questions. Well, our guests will answer your questions at the end of the show. The other thing that you should know is that our internet might get temperamental. Should we lose connection, don't leave, or should the power go out, don't leave, because we will be right back. Today we're discussing public expenditure on procurement of goods and services. Public expenditure is the money that governments spend on social services, infrastructure, education, health, public wages, etc. We know what the government will spend based on what it presents in the annual budget. Most African countries have a national development plan, and the expectation is that the government will spend on things that will bring it closer to achieving the milestones in the plan. In countries like Ghana and Sierra Leone, the biggest expenditure is wages or salaries paid to government staff like teachers and the medical corps. Today we're talking about the spending that governments do to procure goods and services, so we can understand what policymakers need to do to avoid waste, inflated prices, corruption, and to make the process of government procurement of goods and services more open and competitive. Our next guest is often called in to audit procurement already completed, as well as to draft national and international procurement policy. So he's the best person to lead us as we explore government spending on procurement. But before we meet him, here is a word from our sponsor.
You're watching African Experts with Vickie Remoe.
Welcome back. Let's meet our guest, African expert Franklin Ibemesi. Franklin is a global leader in procurement policy and practice. His experience spans across multinational and international organizations operating in 27 countries, 16 of them in Africa. His past and current client portfolio includes the Millennium Challenge Corporation, the World Bank, the African Development Bank, the United Nations, and the International Fund for Agricultural Development, IFAD. He started his career as a procurement officer with the United Nations Assistance Mission in Sierra Leone, UNAMSIL, in the year 2000. In 2004, he joined a World Bank funded program as a procurement specialist, managing a $60 million procurement budget across the capital Freetown and 19 local councils in Sierra Leone. He's a procurement advisor and procurement consultant with the Millennium Challenge Corporation, where he advises on the MCC's $10 billion fight against poverty globally. Franklin is the CEO of EBMSE Consulting, a firm specializing in procurement consulting services. He has a Master's of Science in Procurement Management from the University of Strathclyde in the UK, and an MBA from the University of Liverpool, also in the UK. He's a member of the Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply, MCIPS, and a certified project management practitioner under Prince 2. Franklin, thank you so much for being a guest on African Experts. We met in 2008 when you were leading procurement for the World Bank funded decentralization project in Freetown and in the rest of Sierra Leone. Prior to that, I had actually never, ever even heard of the word procurement. But through your work and our mutual friend, I was able to learn that if there's corruption in contracting or purchasing, it is often a question of a botched procurement. So my first question to you is this. I have a child in my house and they've just entered the room. So we'll let him. Can I have 5 minutes? No, can I have 5 minutes? Okay, we're gonna go to a quick commercial break. I'm going to have a quick commercial break and then we'll be right back. Will you give me 5 minutes? To life of being a home streaming broadcaster and a parent. Now you see what that happens. Anyways, Franklin, back to our conversation. What do you think it is, and I don't know if this is a fair question to ask you, but what is it about procurement as a practice that makes it so easily corrupted?
Hello?
Yes, you're on.
So good evening, Vickie. Thanks for having me. I lost connection for a second there, so I didn't. If you asked the question, I didn't hear it.
Okay, sure. No, that's fine. No worries at all. No, I was saying, what is it about procurement as a practice that makes it so easily corrupted? And is that even a fair statement to make? Is it easily corrupted?
So many years ago, when we didn't have the procurement function, we had different people using funding to procure or buy or purchase. So what has happened now is that having created the procurement arm of the work that governments do, all the spending, the procurement spending at least, goes through the procurement function. So where spending is, usually that's where corruption is. So it is where corruption takes place. If the ease at which procurement attracts corruption also has to do with what economies are we talking about? What drags people to corruption? So these two are linked. But I would agree with your statement that yes, procurement is one of the huge issues for corruption.
Okay. How did you get into this line of work? It's not like 2 decades ago procurement was necessarily a hot topic or a specialist field. What was it that led you into this field?
No, I got into procurement by complete accident. I was a lecturer in university, and I was hired in UNAMSIL for basically some other work. And by the time I got there, HR had some confusion with what section I should be in. And so in the end, they said, we're going to take you to procurement. And that was how I started that in the year 2000. And the rest, as we say, is history. Hi, Vickie, I hope you can hear me. I can't hear you. I can see you and know you're speaking, but I can't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. Okay.
I can hear you now, yes.
Okay, fantastic. Sorry. Now, in the countries that you have worked, what would you say is the common denominator across the board in the way that governments procure goods and services? And what is the one thing, or what are some of the things that need to exist that lets you know, okay, these people are serious about the way they spend on goods and services? What do you need to see?
So it's easy to tell when you're doing the procurement process whether the procurement office or the buyer or the government is interested in getting the product that they need or getting something out of it also. This is why procurement rules state that when you do procurement, you should not benefit from it at all. And so the type of documentation tells you. I worked in 27 countries, like you said, 16 of them in Africa. And sometimes just basic documentation tells you how the procurement is likely to pan out. But you have to look at a lot of things. What is the situation with the bidding community in the country? Do they have a good bidding community? Can suppliers, contractors, and consultants do the work that is available that the procurement are going to buy at some point in time? So these are all issues that you look at. And yeah, are there barriers to entry? This is something that you see in a lot of countries. So what you have is that you have procurements being done and you have criteria or requirements in the bidding documents that form barrier to entry for good bidders to enter. Sometimes it's just a basis of leaving out international bidders. This is a common practice in a lot of countries. Sometimes it's other barriers to entry, which then suggest that this procurement may end up being corrupted.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
In the procurement process, there are some barriers that lend value, that are necessary for the process. But then when you look at these barriers, you can tell straight away that these barriers are going to render value, or they're basically just going to actually restrict value and allow only a certain number of players to participate.
Okay. So I'm glad you bring up this issue of value, right? So we're talking about procurement and government spending at a time when the majority of African countries are still donor dependent and budgets almost run on a deficit by design. In many of the countries that you work, public spending covers infrastructure like contracts on roads and buildings to public sector goods like energy and water. Citizens know that governments have to spend, right, to meet their needs. But public spending often sees governments procuring goods and services at 200%, 500% the market value, effectively wasting taxpayer money and donor funds. By the time citizens find out about these deals, it's often too late. The waste has already occurred. What is the worst procurement deal that you have audited where you saw the most waste? And why do you think that these bad procurement deals happen so often?
So I've seen a lot of bad deals, and I remember a particular procurement where the goods were bought for probably about 350% what they were worth. I'm not going to tell you which country. You understand how that works, but yes, I've seen a lot of that. But so this is the issue of value, and value runs across two different sets of levels in the procurement process. There's product value and there's process value. If you follow all the rules as they're supposed to take place, that's process value. That still doesn't mean that at the end, you cannot get wrong value, and that's product value. If you plan to buy a laptop and you then go across the process and run the process properly, then you have process value. But if you always plan to buy a laptop that was 4 MB RAM, that will never work for you. Even though the process is correct, there's still no value in the product. So there's process value and there's product value. So what happens usually is they plan to buy certain stuff, but certain people may want to gain financially off that deal. And procurement rules as a basis sets that no one should gain. The process should take its place. There should be a transaction, and you should buy best value, which as a starting point means the lowest evaluated product that meets the specifications. So this is the basis of that.
Okay. So you're not going to tell us at all what country you were in that they did this. Can you tell us what it was they bought and what the price was and what the market value was versus what it was procured for?
It was 350% more. That I can tell you.
Right? Like, I have signed a non-disclosure agreement. It is not going to happen. Bye-bye. Anyway, with that, we'll take a short break. And if you've not yet subscribed to our YouTube channel, this is a good time to do that. We'll take a short break.
You're watching African Experts with Vickie Remoe.
Welcome back to African Experts. Before we go any further, I really need to tell you what's going on right now with me, which is that I have no electricity in my house, which means that my AC isn't working in this studio, and I'm actually sweating African bullets because the light is really bright and we're on an inverter. So if you see me dabbing my face, that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to catch some of this excessive sweating that's going on. But thank you so much for joining us. You're watching African Experts, and we're broadcasting live from Accra, and this show is being produced from Freetown. Okay, so today my guest is procurement expert Franklin Ibemesi, and we're talking about public spending and procurement. Before we went to break, we were talking about waste in public spending. And with that, the African gods have smiled on me and the power has come back on. Thank you so much, African gods. Before we went to break, we were talking about waste. I know, it's fantastic. And what you've just seen is the changeover to, good Lord. Okay, maybe I just needed to complain to you guys and the light would go on. Anyway, so before we went to break, we were talking about waste in public spending when governments procure goods and services. Franklin, what policy shifts or changes need to happen to make public spending reduce waste, or in simple terms, to take out the corruption and make it less corrupt? Because if we're talking about inflated prices, if we're talking about people benefiting from the process in a way that isn't about the process, right? The process naturally picking or choosing the right person. We're talking about corruption. What needs to happen to lessen corruption in procurement?
So that's a good question. That's a huge ask. Because in my experience, what I've seen is that whenever you have corruption in procurement, the way to address it is the only way to address it is to address corruption itself as a whole within that environment, within the political environment, within the economical environment, because it is almost impossible to tackle corruption on its own under procurement. In many environments that I've worked, you get the feeling as if corruption in itself is not corruption. People actually believe they have the right to participate in this. It's like other people have done it. Now it's my time to do it. It's not just procuring something that is 3 times more the money. It's even procuring things that no one needs. That's also value.
Right.
Or procuring something that is a want rather than a need. Or
Right. So
procuring
are you
specific.
saying that there are procurements that happen that people know, like no one is going to benefit from the products or the services we're going to procure, but they still go and do the procurement because, wow.
Because yes, and sometimes it's like, well, the country has been given money by one of the IFIs, and we need to spend it. Let's keep going. You have situations where I'm talking about want to need where people procure things, even if you run the process properly, even if you buy it for the correct price, if what you buy is a want rather than a need, you still have waste. If you buy into a project, you buy a project vehicle, and you buy a Range Rover instead of a Toyota Prado, that's still waste. Because for what you need, you do not need a Range Rover. Do you see? It gets deeper.
Please, let's not.
Okay.
I know
Yeah.
that there are governments, people like Range Rover. I don't want to get in this conversation about
Okay.
Prados, Coronas, and
Okay.
Toyota, and because But what do you think? What do you think needs to happen? I mean, I understand this sense of entitlement because I mean, from my experience and what I've seen is that even the profession of procurement, in a way, because it's been commodified as this like game that people can play, it has perhaps attracted certain individuals whose kind of motivation for getting into the practice of procurement is because they want to come and be in this game. So then,
Yeah.
again, what is your advice? How can we make this process less corrupt? What can we do? Like, what can organizations do? What can government agencies do? And what do citizens need to look for?
So government needs to put people in procurement roles that are fiduciarily responsible.
Okay.
Because if you look at procurement, especially across the region, Africa, you find that what you see a lot of is the lack of punitive measures for these things. So there's not much responsibility. If you look at a lot of countries that I've worked in, including in West Africa, you do not find that they have a measure where bad bidders are punished. So if you go to the
Okay.
website of choose any 5 procurement agencies that you know, and I mean procurement authorities in any country, you will find that they do not have a debarred list. So, and I'm thinking this is from a supplier's perspective I'm giving you. So a bad supplier in one ministry, who the ministry doesn't do business with anymore, can basically switch to another ministry and just do business. If you're unable to punish suppliers, you're unable to punish bad procurement people. So we really have to go to start first of all. Let's be all collectively responsible. Let's put people, procurement leaders, who can ensure that corruption does not take place. It takes place less.
Right.
And let's call suppliers to fault when they do. Let's blacklist them temporarily, permanently. That is how good organizations, the World Bank, the MCC, IFAD, the ADB, all the development, this is how they call people to account. And if you caught doing something, you're fired, you're not promoted, or then you go and work for a while and then get another job. So this is exactly how this should be done.
Right.
This is exactly, and also just to what you said, in most African countries, procurement because of the benefit. There's no vertical framework. A procurement officer doesn't become a procurement specialist and a senior procurement specialist and a procurement manager. A lot of people don't think about that because if we're going to engage in corruption, then who cares? So you must
Right.
have a proper vertical framework built into the civil service, even for procurement people. There's some of that, a lot of that for finance people, but it's hard to find that for procurement people. So all that has to be brought to bear. And
Okay.
yeah, people need to be paid well too. And I don't mean people need to be paid a lot of money. Just be paid competitively across the board. So this is what it is. Because I find that in a lot of countries when people are even in court, they do not feel any change. They like
Mm-hmm.
feel as if they actually have a right to this. That this
Mm-hmm.
is something that actually augments salaries.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a huge ask. It is not easy, but good procurement leadership is the first step
Okay, and
in
where
the.
does that come from? Where does the procurement leadership come from?
So in countries, if you're doing proper procurement, you have a procurement authority. That's the procurement authority that regulates procurement and stuff like that. Usually, apart from what they buy for themselves, they do not actually implement procurement. They just regulate it. Then each ministry or combination of ministries have procurement offices. So from the authority, from the procurement offices, we need to have responsible procurement leaders who understand what it is, that corruption shouldn't be part of the processes that they run, who understand that the waste affects the very economy and affects the well-being of people as a whole. And this is actually should be the norm. But even the people that the procurement leaders report to should be responsible themselves. Because if you're a responsible procurement leader, but if you have government people higher than you who are not interested in having value in the process, it is unlikely that you would succeed. So this is, you know there's no way to do this without having um, the will to succeed properly, to do it properly, and
How
understanding that the gains that we make will work for the economy. Yes.
So one of the things that I noticed over the years was this culture of three invoices, the three invoice procurement culture, right? And when I first became a young professional and I was working in West Africa, and it seemed like that's what procurement is. Like somebody comes and says, "Oh, I want to give you this deal, but just go and get me three invoices." And in a way, it kind of appeared as though this was it became like the supply culture, right? Where everybody just knows we're doing procurement, but just go get three invoices. How did that come about? Like, what is that? I'm sure that there's like a law or regulation that that's supposed to be related to. Where did this three invoice behavior come from? And if I'm a leader in an organization, in a ministry, department of agency, what do I need to look for to know that my procurement officer and some contractor are maybe playing games, right? How can I, what insights can you give us to those of us who maybe one day we're in leadership where we don't know anything about procurement? We know that we've authorized for something to happen, but what are some of like the games that procurement officers play that we can look to?
Okay, let's talk about the three quotations as a first issue. This is the most interesting of topics in procurement, and it's actually based on a huge misunderstanding. So most laws, okay, no law asks you to get three procurement, to go for three quotations. The law says that you should receive not less than three. It
Okay.
doesn't ask you to go for three, but that you should receive not less than three. So now look at the situation here, which says I go to audit and I find 30 procurement processes done, and these are processes under a method called shopping. Shopping is the easiest method in procurement. It's for low value procurement. For high value procurement, there are other methods, and the three quotation method doesn't work. So for shopping, you go for and receive not less than three quotations. So if I go to audit and I find 30 files, and I find that each of these 30 files, they have received three quotations. I can't hold them legally,
Right.
but I can tell there's something wrong.
Okay.
Because to get three quotations all the time, you have to ask for more. If you ask
Right.
three bidders all the time, you will get less than three. So if you ask three bidders all the time and each time get three, there's a red flag, or at least an orange flag, because it's not illegal. But
Right.
here, there, right there, we have a problem. So any proper procurement office must have what we call a supplier database. The different names for it: vendor database, supplier database. Each time you procure, the people who participate to go into this database. So if you have a list of 20 bidders, and for different commodities, but say 20 bidders who can supply computer equipment, that means laptops, desktops, maybe even servers.
Mm-hmm.
Each time you buy, if you want proper value, you must go to all 20 of them. You may receive three, but you may receive 11 or 16. The more bids you receive, the more value you're likely to get when you evaluate. So that's the question of value. You receive value, you evaluate value. If you get two bids, then you know what I mean? It's binary. What are you going to do? But the more bids you get, the better offers you get, the better prices you get. So even when I go to audit and I find three quotations, yes, you're correct. But I'll tell you that this process itself is, is not fraught with any degree of you wanting value. You have met the legal requirements, but you haven't gone for value. So if you're looking, first of all, for red flag, that's usually red flag number one. All the files have three quotations. So there it is. And they've met the legal thing, it says the quotations. And then, but the question you ask is, if you have a list of 20 bidders for equipment, how did you choose the three to send to? How did you choose the five or the seven? What happened to the 13? And some places they do a procurement for laptop in January, bidder A won. They do a procurement for laptops in March, and they said Franklin said should invite the others. So they invite 10 other bidders without inviting bidder A, who won the last time. To come, and
Right.
they said, no, you said we should invite more. Yes, but bidder A won, you should invite him again against this new batch. Which is why the best way actually is to invite them all each time.
Okay, so
Yeah.
last week on this show, and I have to ask it because last week on the show we talked about the potential benefits of using IoT, machine learning, and artificial intelligence to solve development challenges. Now, I don't believe that digitalization can solve all problems, but when we're talking, because I feel like what we're talking about is processes, right? Processes that repeat all the time. And so government agencies, for example, buying cars or computers or seats for farmers, it just seems to me that removing the human from the picture, that is maybe procurement officers like you, or at least digitizing some of their tasks, would be the answer to reducing waste or perhaps limiting their influence. Negative influence, we could drive the process and make it less value driven, right? So and I'd love to hear from you actually, which is why I want to know, because everything now we're like digitize, but what are the ways digitalization in procurement and supply chain could make public spending maybe more cost effective, efficient, and transparent? And are there any projects that you're working on now where certain components of the procurement have moved to digital?
Thank you, Vickie. So COVID has taught us a lot of things. It taught us that we're not abreast with technological advancements. But technological initiatives are important in procurement. There are tons of them that one could use. Um, for instance, when I tell procurement officers that if you have 20 bidders, you must invite them all 20. And procurement officers' next question is, suppose I have a list of 80 bidders for laptops. Should I spend the whole day sending them an email one by one by one? Because I tell them in this procurement, you can't BCC.
Right.
So there are tools they can use, technological tools they can use, which when you hit one button, sends the bids out to all bidders, instead of actually writing one email to 70 bidders the entire 2 days. That's just an example of technological initiative you can use to get better value. But there's another one that's very interesting that I need you to understand. So CIPS, which you spoke about when you started, used to be called the Chartered Institute of Purchasing and Supply. And they changed a couple of years ago from purchasing to procurement. There's a particular reason for us being called procurement people. Purchasing is the business of buying things that are not strategic. The entire purchasing process does not bring value. So if I work in the processing sector, if I buy services, if I buy consulting services, or if I buy complex works, I'm doing procurement. If I keep on buying stapler and pin and A4 paper and T-Pex and post-it notes, that is purchasing. What procurement people need to get into is to concentrate on all these strategic procurements. So when you submit your procurement plan for year 2021 or year 2022, there should only be strategic procurements in there. Because the purchasing part of it, you should not waste time on, or you're not being strategic, you're not getting any value. So for instance, to refer to what you just said, in Indonesia, there was a process that we're doing. We did this also in Kenya. All laptops or printers or scanners to be bought by the government of Indonesia were already frameworks. So there's a huge procurement process they did, and it took 4 months, and they awarded contracts for 3 years or 4 years. You want to buy a laptop, go online to the site, click laptop, put it in your basket. Your supervisor will come and press F5 and approves it. You will get a laptop. Don't get on a process to buy a laptop. That process was done, took 4 months. So for 3-4 years, no one is telling me they're doing the procurement process to buy paper, vehicles, scanners. All those purchasing items are done, which also takes the corruption out of it.
Right.
Now we concentrate on strategic procurement. We're trying to build a huge highway across the bridge. We're trying to have IT software systems that is needed for the Ministry of that, Department of Revenue. That is, then you can concentrate on strategic procurement. And just by doing that in itself, you've reduced waste, not even corruption waste, just waste as it should be. So this is a huge part about what do we do strategic procurement. You go to the procurement plans that I see across the region, and you see stuff that is not supposed to be there. We even have in procurement plans as of 2020, procurement of Microsoft Office. That is not a procurement. What TVDs are you buying from? It's online. Click, download, you will have it free for 30 days, and then you take out what we call a purchasing card and pay. Why would you buy Adobe for 3 bidders? What 3 bidders? They're not procurement items. You just need to actually get them. There are acquisitions that you should do.
Do you think that some of the purchasing that gets turned into procurement is because people want to bring in middlemen, perhaps, because then the middlemen could. I mean, like an example I'm going to use, which is a real life example, was from the recent audit in Sierra Leone that came out from, I believe it was 2019, and it had to do with cars. And in the audit report said that cars had been procured. There's like a Toyota dealer in the country, meaning that the person who's purchasing the cars could have gone to the Toyota dealer in the country or picked up the phone and said, "Hello, Toyota dealer in Sierra Leone, I want to buy 10 cars." And could have gotten a direct quote because there is no other Toyota dealer in Sierra Leone. If you're going to buy a Toyota car in Sierra Leone that's new, that's from Toyota, it's going to be from this one authorized dealer. But what the audit report showed was that instead the procurement went out and the contractor was awarded to a middle person who then went to buy the car from the same Toyota dealer, and the price was like 200% what it would have cost if that procurement officer had simply gone and said, "Hey, we want to buy cars," right? So is it possible, and I mean, this is kind of like a rhetorical question, is the reason then that things that ought to be purchasing end up being procurement because people want to bring more fingers to the soup?
So the two things here, first of all. The first thing is, if you want to do things right, or actually, if you want to do the right thing, then what are you supposed to do? But the second question is, if you don't want to do the right thing in the first place, then it doesn't matter what we suggest here, nothing is going to happen. Right. Also, let me make something, I'm going to give you a lot of fun facts today. Middleman, the terminology in procurement means someone that is legally middle. So if you in Sierra Leone and you go to buy from the Toyota dealer in Sierra Leone, that's a middleman. There are no other middlemen.
Between you and the manufacturer.
That's it. Because that company has a legal basis to sell Toyota vehicles. No other person should sell Toyota vehicles. So technically, if somebody else sells you a Toyota vehicle, even though they buy it from the authorized dealer, that vehicle has no warranty. Because only that authorized dealer has the right to provide warranty on that vehicle. The authorized dealer may try to extend the warranty, but he is not in a legal position to do so. So first of all, Toyota itself, in the model that they used to sell, if you ask Toyota for a quotation and they ask you, is it for Sierra Leone? So yeah, they'll tell you, we're not sending you the quotation. In Sierra Leone, only one firm can give you a quotation for Toyota legally. In
and
Sierra
it's
Leone.
Their authorized dealer.
Yes. If you want to invite people from overseas, some bidders from overseas will participate who are also authorized dealers, but in Sierra Leone. And even if a bidder from overseas participates, that bidder will tell you in its document, as it is required by law from Toyota, that the company in Sierra Leone will support this warranty.
Right, because they're
so even if they look, that's it. But if someone in Sierra Leone that is not an authorized dealer of Toyota sells you vehicles, let's forget about the price for a second. That vehicle does not have a warranty. Toyota also, nowadays, every vehicle that they sell, they know who they sold it to. But if you buy it from a briefcase man in Sierra Leone, Toyota may not know that that vehicle is where it should be. So it's not just the cost that's the issue, the legal issues here. So this is exactly how we. So I don't know if I blew your mind that, but that.
No,
yeah.
It's too much because when you think about it, they're like, oh, like it takes the conversation to a place that's like so far back in terms of the problems that we cause when we don't, I guess, follow the right process, right? In just looking at, I want to make a deal where I profit, you then create another problem where now you've purchased something that is of lesser value, that cost you more, but is now of lesser value because you don't even get a warranty, right?
Yeah.
So next time you have something happen to your car, which undoubtedly if you're driving in these kinds of roads, you can't call the dealer and say, hey, this thing stopped working. Now you have to spend some more money, right? For repair and servicing. So where do we go from here, sir?
And usually public procurement would not, except if you have a justification, may not allow you to state Toyota in your bidding document. They will say, put the specs for the SUV because we want everyone to participate, including
Right.
Nissan, Mitsubishi. But then
Sure.
if someone is going to quote Toyota in Sierra Leone, only one bidder can present that bid. That's just how
Okay,
it works.
so what you're saying is that the way that we can maybe digitize is, first of all, having this database of suppliers, right? Where, let's say, government knows that for Toyotas, for vehicles, for SUVs, here's the database of everybody who's an authorized dealer, right? Or here's the database for computers. Here is, for all these things that are purchasing, to really treat them as purchasing, because there is no value in going through a procurement process, because going through the process isn't something that's going to change the price, right? If like with this specs, Toyota's price is XYZ, it doesn't matter how many people bid for this, right? The price is not going to go beyond that which the manufacturer is retailing or wholesaling the product.
Exactly.
In fact, procurement can just make the price go up, right?
Yeah.
Because
So
that's
you
what
must have a supplier database, but you must take it to the next step, which is what we did in Kenya. What they did in Kenya was that they did a huge public procurement for vehicles, and Toyota Kenya won. And so the government said they needed to now digitize a website which has the framework. So each ministry can go to the website and click and buy a Toyota. Before they did that, they sent PDFs to all the ministries and agencies. And they said, so here's the PDF. We're trying to work on the website. If you want a vehicle, it could be Toyota Prado, it could be a Toyota Camry, it could be whatever Toyota. You just do that and you send an email. So now, no one is buying vehicles. You see my point? For 3 years, you've left vehicles. They're expensive, but it's actually not strategic at all. It's easy to buy. And 10 Toyotas, because people confuse complex and large value procurement. If you buy 20 vehicles, it is more expensive, but it is not complex. It is one vehicle times 20. So while the price is high, it is not complex procurement at all. So all these you can framework, and then so Toyota Kenya for 4 years will sell you vehicles at this price. So we've taken it off. Let's assume we've taken paper off, we've taken computers off. Do you see now, even the prospect of corruption is already
right.
being
You're closing the loopholes. You're closing the opportunities, or taking away the opportunities for corruption in those things that are repeated processes, right? Like, we're going to be buying this all the time. In fact, let's just fix price. Let's just solve that. Nobody in any ministry is buying this thing. We've already sorted it out. Right. Okay. Fantastic. Now, I think on the other side, something that viewers might be interested in hearing about is for those people who are in business, right? If I'm a supplier, or, you know, I produce something, I do services, et cetera, et cetera. When should we not participate in procurement? right? As in the sense that what are the red flags that we need to look for when, because I've seen this happen where you're just a businessman, somebody comes to you and says, hey, this deal is happening, government is looking for this, you should bid, right? That happens. What are some of the red flags that business owners should really hold back from, no matter how seemingly good the opportunity looks to do business with government? What are the red flags from a procurement perspective?
Because there's one thing, and before that, I'm going to drop a fun fact. Pro forma invoices are not quotations
Okay.
in procurement. So just as long as we use the terminology, there's a problem there. So
Okay.
we know that people go to companies and say, give me a pro forma invoice. That's not a quotation. A quotation is a much more proper document that has terms and conditions in it. So people should stop going for pro forma invoices. Business people should stop giving it to people.
Right.
Because
So if somebody comes to me and says, Vickie, give me an invoice for communications consultancy, I should automatically see that as a red flag, because that person may just be trying to get a price from me, right? Yes. So then they can go put it in as a number and give somebody else the opportunity, maybe, right?
Yeah, yes, the person may be trying to get the price. Worse, the person may be trying to use your quotation as a backup, what we call a backup, which means they already have a quotation that's going to win, but they need to have three. Let's have one from Vickie, one from someone else.
So you're just appearing there like to fill a file, because they're trying to meet that baseline metrics that we discussed earlier, that people think that if you get three quotations. Okay, so that's one red flag. What's another red flag?
If they come without a document.
Like an actual procurement.
You need to formalize procurement. I remember when I was in Namibia, we were doing a huge procurement, and the bidding document was big, and we said, we're going to put them in CDs. This process just took forever to put them in CDs. So we decided, and I said, we're not putting them in CDs anymore. We're sending it to people via an email as a link. You download the PDF. This is how this entire PDF thing in for bidding documents started. And so a bidder came and said, I want the CD. We don't have a CD. Give us your email. We're not selling the bidding document. That's another thing we should stop. There's no value in selling bidding documents. So I said,
agencies constantly sell bidding documents. They say they're recovering the cost of printing, their printing costs or something. I've definitely picked up a bidding document.
Right. It's correct.
That I was charged $50 for.
Okay. So that they're recovering the cost is correct. And so they say sometimes that an act or regulations require you to sell the bidding document because you have to be
We've lost.
Hello?
Sorry, we lost you there for a second. You were at an actor bidding document.
I'm not sure if it's you or me. Hello? Hello?
You're back now.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Yes, so most laws state that you should sell the bidding document what it costs you to produce it. To produce it means the paper, the ink, and the binder if you use to bind the paper. The technique is the law says how much it costs you to produce it, which means if you do not print it, it costs you nothing.
Right.
So I have the PDF here. I'm moving the box to you. I'm not printing, you print if you want. Or you could just read it from your device. So I provide the document to you via email attachment, or if it's too huge, via a link. And the document you can print if you want. I'm printing one copy if I'm required to, and putting it in the file.
Sure.
There's no mess, there's no toner running out. They use that as also a way to debar people who participate. They do a whole document, it's 110 pages, and it's only legible till page 36. Page 37, it starts to grow, you losing the thing. But they're selling it like that, they won't change it. That's all barriers to entry.
Okay, so right now we have if anybody asks you for an invoice, and we also have if there isn't a bidding
Pro forma
document,
invoice. A
a
pro forma
performance.
invoice. Yes.
Right. Invoice,
Yes.
and if there isn't an actual procurement document that guides and explain the procurement process. And what would you
Yes.
say the final one is, as a contractor or a business person, that when you see these kinds of procurement, procurement-y, because you're saying they're not really procurement, right? Procurement looking activities that are red flags and maybe that this process isn't going to be fair and fair.
So procurement people have two ways to reach people. Either by advertisement, meaning you publish a procurement opportunity in the newspapers, in websites, or by invitation, and or by invitation. By invitation is they sending you an RFQ because you're in the database to say we want this to participate. This actually should be the only two ways you're contacted. So if
Okay.
someone wishes you, and procurement also, the definition of procurement is formal or less formal process. The less formal process is like the one I explained, shopping. There are no informal processes in procurement.
So I shouldn't be getting a WhatsApp message to say,
No,
hey,
yeah,
I have this procurement in my office.
you shouldn't. Or even when you've gotten the bidding document, someone should not call you except if that's backed by email. Because when I call you, there's no way to put that in the file.
Right.
You see what I mean? I need to account for whatever transactions we have in the file. This is why bidders can't call procurement people and say, page 36 of your bidding document is not correct. No, send an email.
Right.
And I will answer not just you, but all those who are participating at the time. So there's also the issue of transparency and fairness between bidders. One bidder should not have an information that another doesn't have. In procurement, there's a way. Sometimes I'm doing a procurement, I don't know how it costs. So I will, if I'm doing that, I'll call you as an expert and tell you I'm doing a procurement. I don't know how much it costs. I'm telling you straight that it is likely that what you tell me I may use as a budget cap.
Sure.
But I have to be clear that's what I'm doing to set. I'm not doing the procurement yet. I'm just trying to set and you could say, well, hire me as a consultant or something like that. But you have to be open. That's why we have a procurement pre-procurement initiative we call the RFI, request for information. We advertise that, and so we want to buy something. We don't know how to write the TOR. We don't know how much it's going to cost. We don't know what methodologies exist. And then bidders will just pop and talk to you and come to meeting. It's called a RFI, request for information. MCC does that all the time.
My last and final question before we leave this conversation, when I'm never answering, nobody asked me for invoice ever again. Of that proportion, so I don't end up in a file, is what is your advice to policymakers? Like ultimately, they're the ones who oversee the regulation, right? They're the ones who set the standard and set the bar. Like you said, they have to be leaders, right? Leaders in procurement. What is one change that can be made really quickly and instantly that you feel could have a big impact on making procurement more transparent or more fair or more value driven?
So each time we do a corrupt procurement, it's as if we got a ding, a red ding. If you're dealing with international organizations and stuff like that. Now, when international organizations come to give you a project, they will assess your risk. They will assess your project risk, but they will also assess your procurement risk. If your procurement risk is high, and how is your procurement risk high? They've come to know how much corrupted procurement have taken place over time. If your procurement risk is high, your thresholds are high. So, and I'll explain that in a second. When your thresholds are high, your ability to meet the project goal is already hampered. So if you go to some countries, and I can tell you this for sure, they can do shopping procurement method for up to $500,000.
Okay.
Shopping procurement method moves fast, so they get what they want in just 30 days, up to $500,000. If you go to a lot of our countries, that threshold is $50,000. After $50,000, they have to use a more rigorous, risk-free methodology, which takes more time and affects the project's goal. So this is how we shoot ourselves in the foot at the same time. So what I would advise policy leaders is that put people in procurement positions that are responsible. They must obviously have enough experience in procurement, but they have to be, first of all, responsible. And the procurement authorities in countries need to not be reporting to ministries.
It's 19
They
hours.
need to have a decent amount of independence, or this will never take off. If they feel they're scared of one minister or one head of agency, they will never be able to do the work properly. So the procurement authorities, the regulation bodies, must have sufficient amount of independence to be able to function properly.
Thank you so much. With that, we've come to the end of today's edition of African Experts. I would like to thank my production team at VRNC Marketing Company in Sierra Leone. They are Salwa Kamara, Franklin Bob McEwen, Mohamed Gando Jallo, Abdulhamid Kanu, Alassane Carbo, and Augustine Carbo. And of course, thank you to our guest, Franklin Messi, and all of you across the continent and the diaspora for tuning in. For more information about this and other shows, please visit africanexperts.net. If you'd like to be a member of our guest family, please definitely visit our website. You can apply to be on the show. Here is our African quote of the day. Today's quote is from none or other than Chinua Achebe, Nigerian author who died in 2013. And the quote of today is this: "One of the truest tests of integrity is its blunt refusal to be compromised." That is from Chinua Achebe. Until next week, thank you, Tenki, Tata, from all of us here at African Experts. See you next Sunday.
Thanks for having me.